Hey, pawnbrokers, welcome back to another episode of the Pawn Leaders Podcast. And today, I'm so fortunate, you're so fortunate, that our guest is Chris Voss. And Chris Voss is the CEO of the Black Swan Group and the author of the national bestseller, Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as if your life depended on it, which was named one of the 7 best books on negotiation. He's a 24-year veteran of the FBI. Chris retired as the lead international kidnapping negotiator. Drawing on his experience in high-stakes negotiations, his company specializes in solving business communication problems using hostage negotiations solutions. Welcome, Chris, to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks. It's my pleasure. I'm happy to be on.
So I brought you on. I heard you on a good friend's podcast, Ian and Michael Ports, and I thought to myself, for 16 years, all I did was negotiate every single day with clients. And there were negotiations that were small. How much can I get for this item? I want to buy this item. Give me a discount. So I thought this would be the perfect fit for the pawnbrokers to learn from you how to negotiate better.
All right. Hopefully.
Awesome. Yeah, let's do it. So I did some research, obviously, on you. And the first thing I want to talk about is that what we've learned about negotiations is all wrong. That's what you say.
Yeah. Most of the academic books, I take a different approach. Absolutely.
So tell us about that. What do you think? What have we learned and what's your method of negotiation?
Well, the vast majority of it is intellectually sound. And the problem is human beings are not intellectually sound. Getting to yes. And the people that wrote it and the people who've been affiliated with it. The first time I was up at Harvard Law School's negotiation project, I had the pleasure of meeting Roger Fisher, brilliant guy. Just oozing emotional intelligence, if you will, but not the book. Getting to yes is rational, come to a rational agreement, a wise agreement. It's intellectually sound, but people are not intellectually sound. People are emotional creatures. And so why not just start from that premise, which is true, and take a set of skills that are designed with that being the fundamental underlying premise, which is what hostage negotiation is all about. Hostage negotiation is just intense human behavior. It's not any different. It just actually, it's often not as intense as we are in our day-to-day interactions. People act as if their life is on the line over the smallest thing. So hostage negotiation tools work that.
So tell us about how you got into hostage negotiation. That's something that a lot of people see on TV, on movies. How did you get into that line of work?
Well, with nearly every law enforcement agency that has hostage negotiators, for the vast majority of the negotiators, it's an additional duty. So I was an FBI agent. I was an FBI investigator. I worked terrorism. And I knew we had hostage negotiators. I was actually also involved in SWAT. When I was in Pittsburgh, and FBI Pittsburgh, I was on a SWAT team there. Then when I was in New York, I was on the terrorist task force. I wanted to be a hostage negotiator. I figured it was easy. How hard could it be? I talk to people every day. I must be able to negotiate. And anybody that's really into negotiation knows that it's nuanced, it's fascinating, it's complicated, it's really getting in deep into human behavior. So when I got into it, it ended up being 10 times more interesting than anything I expected. And of course, I was initially rejected because I was eminently unqualified. But I asked the woman in charge of the team in New York, Amy Bondrow, what I could do. And she said, go volunteer on a suicide hotline, which is like the best practice of navigating human behavior. It's incredible. It's a laboratory. And one of the crazy things about the hotline was when I first got there, they said, look, if you take more than 20 minutes to get to the bottom of this and get this resolved, you're doing it wrong. And I remember thinking, 20 minutes? You got to be kidding me. It's got to take hours. And they're like, no, these emotional intelligence skills actually really save vast amounts of time when you apply them. And that's the other thing that's really kind of cool about it. It's the indirect route that saves time. It's the delay that saves time. Without question, a tactical application of empathy will cut anywhere from 20 to 80% of unnecessary communication out. It's astonishing.
So let's talk about that. What is a tactical implementation of empathy? What does that really mean?
Well, what it really means is we know so much about how the brain works now that I know what I'm looking for in advance, as opposed to just trying to, I feel your pain.
Yeah.
Look, I got a pretty good idea what your pain is, so I'm just going to go ahead and articulate it right off the bat. In any given negotiation, if you think I'm being unfair and a bully, I'm going to say, I'm sure it seems like I'm being unfair and kind of bullying you here. Now, that's the hostage negotiator's approach, but the 2 millimeter shift there, which most people do wrong, is they'll deny those feelings and say, I don't want you to think I'm being unfair. I don't want you to think I'm bullying you. Well, that's the 2 millimeter shift that makes light years of difference from the denial to the identification. And, the day and age that we live in now, neuroscience actually shows us that we dial emotions down when we do that, and we get to our resolution much quicker.
Nice. So using empathy in, let's say, a retail environment and understanding what the client wants, what their needs are, is essentially the best way to negotiate, as opposed to, this is how much the item is, this is what I want, and that's it.
Right, because when you lay stuff out in what you believe to be just a direct and honest manner, it feels harsh to the inside. Like there's a difference between someone that we think is direct and honest or blunt, and someone who's a straight shooter. Now, we like straight shooters. We don't like people who are blunt.
Yeah.
Without taking any sort of a position whatsoever on current presidential politics, it wasn't that long ago that Ivanka Trump said about her father, look, my dad's just direct and honest, that's all. And she was just trying to explain away why he seems so blunt and harsh to some people, which drives people away. And there's a subtle difference. Telling someone the truth is not the issue. It's telling them the truth in an emotionally intelligent way, where we appreciate straight shooters because they don't treat us like we're getting hit in the face with a brick when they talk to us. And to say, this is how much it's worth. This is the deal. I'm just giving it to you straight. Sometimes people feel like they're getting hit in the face with a brick, and consequently will either not make the transaction or resent it, which then has a downstream cost.
So what's the best way to go about that? We talked about, if you're blunt and just say, hey, this is how much it costs. That's the way it is. So sorry about that. What could a pawnbroker say in turn so that they connect emotionally with the client?
Well, the 2 millimeter shift, without really even changing what you just said, I'd slightly adjust it two ways. What you did was you laid out the costs and then said you were sorry. Say you're sorry first and then lay out the cost. Because when I'm sorry, if properly dropped into the conversation at the right time, it's actually a warning that bad news is going to come. And it gives people just that slight moment to brace themselves, which they appreciate. It's like, watch out, I'm going to slap you in the face, and in the slap. Or it's slap them in the face and they say, sorry. Now, they appreciate the warning ahead of time. And we do that all the time. When we're getting ready to lay a price on somebody that they're not going to like, we'll say, I'm sorry, this is a price. Instead of, this is a price, I'm sorry. It's amazing how much people appreciate the warning that bad news is coming.
When you were in the hostage negotiations, I saw some of your videos. You talk about one, like a bank robbery, which only comes up once every 20 years. How do you deal with your emotions in that state? You're trying to save a bunch of people inside, making sure that nothing bad's going to happen. How do you deal with your emotional state while thinking about their emotional state at the same time?
And I just got off the phone a few minutes ago and did this with myself again. So the voice triggers emotional reactions in the person that hears it, in anybody that hears it. And you hear your own voice when you talk. If I talk with my late night FM DJ voice, which is designed to calm you down, it actually also calms me down. I just got off the phone not 20 minutes ago with a credit card company trying to get a fee waived, and I was way past the deadline for having a fee waived and all of that stuff. And I was really kind of getting annoyed with the credit card company on the phone. And I switched over to my late night FM DJ voice. And I said, if I'm no longer receiving the benefits, then how am I supposed to pay for the benefits? And it calmed both of us down. And so much got us out of the argumentative mode. And when I got off the phone, because the customer service guy, after telling me that he couldn't do what I asked him to do, and he said, well, do you want to speak to somebody in management? And I said, yes, please. Because if you want asked to speak to someone and they ask you if you want to speak to someone, you want to go, that's what I just said.
Yeah.
But instead I went, yes, please. That's what I'd like. And while I'm on hold, I'm thinking to myself, thank God I used that voice because it kept me from getting angry, controlled my anger. And then when he came back on the phone, he said, I spoke to my supervisor and she's given me permission to waive the fees and refund your money. So calm both of us down at the same time. The late night FM DJ voice is miraculous in what it can accomplish for both sides.
When you were saying that story, I remember when I was in the pawn shop and I would have clients come in yelling at me because they wanted some money back or they thought it wasn't fair. I would just, put a wall up and say, I'm done. There's no way we're talking. Get out of my store. I try to calm the situation. The more they yelled, the more I yelled. Now, when a client walked in and just said, Gal, I'd really like to solve this, with that calm DJ voice, I was able to breathe. So some of my clients used your methods on me, I'm guessing.
Well, and you kind of made the point also, and we run this as an exercise a lot because the first voice is the assertive voice. It's direct and honest. And I'll run 3 different people through all 3 voices. And every person, that assertive voice, what it does is it triggers mirror neurons in your head. And part of your brain actually does get angry. Now, you might be able to control it, and then if part of your brain is getting angry, it's actually triggering a chemical change in your brain. But that chemical change is going through your entire brain. It's making you combative. The mirror neurons are an involuntary response. It's like when the doctor taps your knee with the little hammer and your leg automatically jerks because it hits the nerve. You don't make a choice in that. And what we often do is I can't dial that anger down myself unless I flip to that voice. And then the voice dials me down. But the mirror neurons are going to fire whether you like it or not. And the voice is the best way to even control your own emotions.
In pawnbroking, Chris, there's something that we call, emotional love towards an item. And a customer walks in, they have a ring. And the ring is worth $500 in gold. We want to offer them $400, but they think it's worth $1,000. In your negotiations with some of the big things that you've done with the hostage negotiations, how do you deal with instances where either A, it's not possible to give what the hostage taker wants, or B, you're not meeting somewhere because it's not making sense for either side? It's above and beyond because it's emotional for them. They think there's more value to it.
Well, what you're talking about also in terms of emotional love, it's not just the people in your circumstances. There's something called prospect theory that won the Nobel Prize for behavioral economics. A guy named Danny Kahneman, who wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. There's a really interesting book out there called The Undoing Project by Michael Lewis, who's the guy that wrote Moneyball and The Big Short. Michael Lewis is great at explaining complicated stuff so that, average folks like me can understand it.
And like me.
But prospect theory tells us that we value a loss twice as much as we value a gain. So losing $5 hurts twice as much as gaining $5. It's actually more than that. What does that mean? What does that have to do with what we're talking about? They're going to come in at a high price on something they're losing, and they're not screwing around with you. They emotionally, all human beings value something they're giving up more than they value what they're gaining. There was a study done where they asked people, all right, so it's your favorite bottle of wine. It's in a liquor store. What's a fair price? And people typically say, well, if it's the best bottle of wine on the entire planet, maybe I'll pay $200 for it. And they say, all right, you got the same exact bottle of wine and it's at home in your cabinet. And one of your neighbors wants to buy it from you. What's a fair price? Not screwing around. And they'll say, $1,200. it's insane. It's just a human being response. So what's happening is just apply some emotional intelligence skills. If somebody comes in and wants $500 for something, you can only give them $400. Then get a little proactive with your empathy and say, I'm sure it seems like I'm treating you unfairly. I got nothing but bad news for you. You're not going to like the price I can offer you. And then go dead silent. Now, because the human brain is overly negative, before you throw that offer, if they want 500 and you say to them, you're just not going to like this at all. It's really going to seem unfair. They're going to imagine something like $50. Like their brain will always kick into overdrive. And we typically do this in our bargaining. I don't set a high anchor by expressing it. I set an extreme anchor by letting your brain do it to you.
Gotcha.
And then whatever I say after that is actually a relief to you.
So you've built up the angst, I guess, when the client thinks that you want $500 and then you go silent. They're thinking in their mind, man, this guy's gonna give me $100. And you come back at a higher price. So now they're like, wait, I'll take $400. That I can do that. Right.
Yeah.
So you kind of built that up.
And then, and one step further is, we're finding ranges are ridiculously powerful. I mean, if you give somebody a range of numbers, they're going to say, well, whichever end of this range is against me, I could have settled for that. So it's a win for me to take the other range. So let's say you want to give somebody $400 for a ring. So you might say, look, the best I could do is somewhere between $200 to $400. And they'll say, 400 deal. Because they heard the 200 and they're immediately grabbing the end of the range that benefits them, which they also additionally feel like it's a victory. And it's the difference between them walking out feeling like they lost or they won. Now, why do you want them to walk out feeling like they won? Because you want them to come back,
of course,
and happy. And you also want the word of mouth. Yeah, I went into that pawn shop. They were, wow, I think I got the best deal I could have got. That word of mouth is money in the bank. That's marketing. That's advertising.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that if a pawnbroker was to utilize these methods, then two things happen. One, their stress, decreases because it's a stressful situation to consistently have to be fighting over price.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And then the client also will de-stress and say, hey, I got the best deal. Why don't you go to, Chris's pawn shop? He's a great guy. He gave me the best deal he could. So
yeah, exactly. Exactly right. It does do a great job of controlling your own stress.
Yeah. Now you talk about the word compromise is a bad word, and you say compromise is one of the worst things to do. A lot of times in the pawn shop, we'll have an item for $1,000. And the client will offer $800. And then most pawnbrokers say, how about we meet in the middle, $900? That's what they mostly say. So talk to us about compromise and why it's such a bad word to you and how we can overcome compromising when we're negotiating.
Well, I mean, if you think compromise works good, then you probably think our federal government is an incredibly efficient operation. And you admire politicians. And you think all laws are fantastic and the best we possibly could have done. Because they live by compromise. And, they thank God all those politicians work in government because I don't think they could hold a real job. Yeah. Compromise is horrible. I mean, in reality, compromise, example after example where compromise leaves people unhappy and comes to bad solutions that, I'm looking at a card on my desk from my girlfriend the other day. It says, never half-ass two things, only whole-ass one thing. You got two half-ass ideas. Compromise is really bad. Now in bargaining, people use it as to create an illusion of fairness and will extreme anchor so that they can offer to compromise and end up where they wanted to be all along. Now, there's a certain amount of emotional intelligence involved there if the person on the other side is naive, if they're B players. So I understand why people use it, but the reality is there's an old saying, beware the person who offers to meet you in the middle. They're usually a poor judge of distance.
Oh, wow.
And typically, like the term win-win is most frequently used by really aggressive negotiators. Like I know in my conversations, if somebody brings up the word win-win when they're trying to do business with us, I already know they're trying to get all our services for nothing.
Especially from you, right? Like the master negotiator.
Oh, we see that. I see those guys coming a mile away.
Yeah.
And, so now what happens when you run into an astute negotiator? I may just want to beat you up in the negotiation because you started it. You may go, I may think, all right, fine. You want to rip me off? Okay. That's the game you want to play? Let's go.
Yeah. Nice.
So you got to be careful using that on somebody who's good at negotiating, because you might have revealed something about yourself you didn't really mean to reveal, which is, I want to beat you up. And if somebody can see that coming, again, that's bad for long-term relationship. It's bad for referrals. It's bad for marketing, which is what referrals are. Strongest form of marketing.
Is there also a sense that if I've compromised, that means I have more room to compromise? So if I've come down on my price, that means that I can come down even more. So you can, if you're a strong negotiator, you'll keep bringing me down until the point of like, enough, like just take it or leave it,
Right. There's a very significant portion of negotiators out there that are not going to let up on you until you squeal, if you will. Which means, you're gonna have to drop your price 2-3 times. I know a lot of people. I've run into a lot of people who have said refuse every deal at least twice, because the other side is just going to keep going. Which means, that's part of, if I cut your price once, I'm probably going to cut it again. We found pretty consistently that there's usually 3 rounds of cuts in nearly every negotiation. People walk into a deal expecting to drop their price, and we find that if we do it in an emotional, intelligent way, we can probably get them to knock their price down at least twice before we settle.
You brought up a word, anchor. Can you explain to us a little bit about that, what that means when you anchor something, so that the listeners know?
Well, the anchor is an extreme offer, a high price or low price, one way or the other. It's probably the most common move out there because it works and you don't have to be really smart to use it. I mean, as soon as people start to get out of a compromising mindset, and they start to gain a certain amount of savvy in bargaining, that's pretty much the first move and the only move that they ever learn, because it works really well. I mean, the extreme offer works well. That's why it's used so often. The old Mike Tyson line, everybody has a plan until they get punched. So the anchor is a punch. Most people that teach negotiation advocate high anchors. I mean, I've had a number of conversations with the academics, if you will, and they'll always say, we advise people to go first and to anchor high, and you do not. Why is that? And, my answer is, none of the A-plus players want to go first. You sit down with any of the A-plus players, I don't care. It could be Warren Buffett. It could be any of the Wall Street significant players. And they're going to sit back and they're going to try to get you to go first on a price. They believe that he or she who names price first loses. So going first, extreme anchoring is a good move if you're a B player or less, even a B plus player. You get to people in the A game, they don't want to go first. They look at the price as completely soft, completely flexible. So when you throw out your price, you're just giving them more information on your position, and they love information.
Got it.
Carl Icahn was the other guy I was trying to think of. Carl Icahn loves to punch you hard, but he's going to let you go first, and then he's going to punch you.
Gotcha. There was an instance that a lady walked into my store, and she wanted a watch, and I think it was worth $800. And she said, "Oh, what's the best price? I'll offer you $600." And so I was compromising. I'm so sorry to use that word. And we were negotiating. I met in the middle, and I said, "Fine, I'll give it to you for $600." And she kept on going, "No." So what I did was I said, every time she would say something, I would up my price. right? So she would say, no, I'll give you 500. So I said, 650. No, I said 500, 700. And I said, the more you stick to 500, the more the price just goes up. And she ended up paying me $700. Now, I don't know if I was right in doing that, but I just felt like confidence played a role. And tell me if that's true. Does confidence play a role in negotiation, or has nothing to do with it?
Well, confidence is going to come across, first of all, in your tone of voice. So you're going to tend to less inflame the situation. It sounds to me the way you were responding to it was very matter of fact, as opposed to being argumentative. And that's going to work in your favor. It's actually going to help calm her down. It gives you a confident voice, gives you more authority. Now, so I'm going to speculate your description of her. You didn't describe her as this great customer of mine who's been in a whole bunch of times. This is what happened the first time she was in. Did you ever see her again after that?
She would walk in and try the same thing and then realize that she just couldn't after that one time.
So how many more transactions afterwards?
Maybe 2, because she just consistently wanted to lowball. That was her.
Right. So what's her game? Maybe she's out there having a good time. Who knows? Who knows what it is? She's in and out of a pawn shop. She's getting emotional satisfaction from good deals and from beating you up. It's hard to say how much money was left on the table. I don't think that's a problem with what you did. I might, depend upon the person, we like, instead of escalating price, which I might do as a punishment to someone. But before I punish them, we love the phrase, how am I supposed to do that? And we'll take a position and we work very hard. If somebody wants to bargain with us like that, I'm just going to pick a price and get them to negotiate against themselves and use empathy the whole time and just watch them give in. I don't, there are times when I would take your approach. I might take it as a plan B, depending upon how plan A went.
Yeah. No, I wasn't saying it was the right approach whatsoever.
Well, you got your way.
True. But so let's talk about this. I know that the listeners want to hear everything that we've spoken about, from empathy to compromise to you say that no is not the end of the conversation, right? And
right.
Talk about no and yes a little bit, what that means and why no is not the end of the conversation.
Well, let's go back to, and I want to compare and contrast empathy for just a second also, because most people say empathy then leads to compromise. I mean, my empathy leads to assertion. My empathy puts me in a position where it can be really assertive. The more empathic I am, the more assertive I am. And one of the guys that I really admire a lot, Robert Mnookin, who's the head of the program on negotiation at Harvard, he wrote a book called Beyond Winning, which is primarily for lawyers. But the first chapter of his book is actually kind of a deceptive chapter. It's called the tension between empathy and assertiveness. And I remember reading that chapter thinking I don't think there is a tension. I wonder why he titled it this way. And the answer was, it's a fake title. He ends up making the point that empathy is required for more assertiveness. So, one of the things I like to clear out with people is we're not empathic because we're giving in. We're using empathy in a very tactical manner to be even more assertive, but not leave any hurt feelings. All right. So now let me go back to the question you asked instead of rambling. People feel protected when they say no. And so some people are in no mode. I remember there was a lieutenant with the NYPD that I worked with, and he used to say, Chris, the lieutenant's job is to say no. I've heard people say, the people that we're dealing with on the other side, they're in no mode. That's all they ever say. And my answer to them has been, all right, well, change your questions. Change your questions around so when they say no, it benefits you. Instead of saying, would you like this, say, are you against this? They just love saying no. They don't think about it. They just love saying no. Saying no makes people feel protected and safe. That happens every time. So it sounds stupid, but all you got to do is change your questions. And you'll be astonished at how far you could get by changing and making no work for you.
So when you change your questions and their answer is still no, that's what you're saying is now the no is benefiting you as opposed to stopping what's going on.
Yeah, and I think I believe that we call them calibrated no's. And a calibrated no is worth usually at least 5 yeses. Because instead of, if I try to get you to agree to something, a typical question might be, with everything I've laid out, would you agree this is the best idea? And you might get them to say yes, but they feel that trap. And I'll say instead, with everything I've laid out, are you against this? Is this a bad idea? And their answer will be, well, no. And as a matter of fact, we could do this, this, and this. And then give me 3 or 4 more things that I might normally have to ask about. I mean, that happens every time. So I like kicking things into gear and making them move forward by just changing it so the no works for me.
Nice. Love it. Tell us about one of your hostage negotiations. Obviously people want to hear about that. Tell us one extreme case or one case that really stands out to you where you used all of these methods to, I don't know if you call it win the negotiation or just get back what you needed to get back.
Well, the Chase Manhattan bank robbery that we talk about in the book, one of my favorite cases, because the bank robber on the other side was as in control and as guarded, and as just calculated a person as we ever ran across. I mean, the first hostage negotiator on the phone with him from NYPD, he actually said to the negotiator, "I'm calmer than you are. I'm the calmest one here." And he was hiding lots of things from us. He was as shrewd as they come. A really powerful negotiator, when they come to the table, they'll say, it's not up to me. There's other people involved. In business, they might say, I got a board of directors. I got to check with my wife. I got to check with my kids. They're always alluding to people that are not there. This guy in the bank kept saying, these other guys that are with me, boy, they're the dangerous ones. I'm worried about those guys. He was calling all the shots. So when I get on the phone with him, he said one thing that caught me off guard. And, my instinct was to do this thing called a mirror, which is just repeat word for word the last couple of words the person has just said. Because we found his van out front, and he was keeping his name from us. So I said, we got a van out front here. Do you know who it's registered to? And he says, we don't have a van. I said, you don't have a van? He said, we have more than one van. I said, you have more than one van? He said, well, you chased my driver away. So we chased your driver away? I said, yeah, when he saw the police, he cut and run. Now, those were just mirrors by me because I was caught off guard by what he was saying, and I didn't understand it. The reality was his driver was what we referred to as a black swan, information that we wouldn't have gotten only from him. We didn't know there was a driver involved at that point, had no clue. The driver had been outside the bank. When the bank alarm went out, he was gone. There were no witnesses that connected him to the robbery, no information whatsoever. We'd been had the bank surrounded for, at that point in time, probably about 5 hours.
Wow.
No clue that there was a third guy. He blurted it out because mirrors trigger involuntary sharing of information. And he was the most closely guarded guy that I ever ran across in a contained siege. And, that's the brilliant thing about mirrors is people start doing what we refer to as vomiting information, and they kind of can't help themselves. And that was one of the cool things that happened in that bank robbery.
Nice. I love that. I mean, so he gave up information that he wouldn't have ever given up. And all you do is repeat yourself or repeat.
Right. Just the word for word, anywhere from 1 to 3, maybe no more ever than 5 words, just each and every word. And there's an involuntary response when the other person just adds to it and starts throwing information out there, and they can't stop themselves.
So you said that the bank robbery happens, once every 20 years. Obviously, in movies, it's made bigger than it really is, more drama, all that type of stuff. How is it compared to what we see from what you actually do?
Well, and to qualify, because somebody once hit me with a statistic that said, the FBI crime reports talks about bank robberies with hostages a lot. Well, they take hostages and they get away before the police show up, getting the bank surrounded and getting them contained. Because bank robbers know the police are coming, so they're looking to get out of there as fast as they can. So actually catching somebody inside is the really rare event. Now, what happens most of the time is, they're a little panicked, they're a little confused. They didn't plan on getting caught inside. And it's typically more panicked and less planned than we might have imagined. Like, the Denzel Washington movie, Inside Man, which is a great film, by the way. I really enjoyed it. The bank robbers were in control the whole time. That was part of a larger plan. I thank God in real life they're not that calculated. So they're a lot more panicked than what we typically see on TV.
And it's also true that, in the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, the first chapter talks about how this guy, I don't remember if it was a bank robber or what he was doing, but he would just write a letter and said, I'm doing this for my family. They have reasons that they believe that are right why they're doing it, correct?
Right. And it's, you never know. I mean, there's something that in the book, we call it Find the Other Side's Religion. Some people also refer to that as sacred values, but these are bigger ideals that drive this behavior that on its face makes no sense. But, they got a story in their head to the larger ideals that they're telling themselves. And then what they're living out in their head is, not only does it not make any sense, but we're not going to find out until we get them on the phone and talk to them. And it's pretty much everybody's motivation throughout life, not just bank robbers. So, that's the idea that these emotional intelligence tools are designed to get in the other side's head and find out what the heck is going on in there, so that you can have an influence on what the pattern is and actually change it.
Gotcha. What's the stress level when you're called somewhere to do a negotiation? What's your stress level or a negotiator's stress level at that moment?
Well, it depends upon how prepared they are. We like to say you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your level of preparation. I was always very prepared. I spent a lot of time on a hotline, which meant I got a lot of practice on my emotional intelligence skills. When you put me on a phone, I know in advance when I get into my late night FM DJ voice, I'm going to get the upper hand really quick. Now, if it's somebody that's not that prepared and not that ready, it's the equivalent of taking a game-winning shot, having never rehearsed it. They say Michael Jordan rehearsed game-winning shots hundreds of times on the court by himself. He'd imagine a clock counting down. He'd imagine a defender all over him. He'd build it all up in his head and rehearse it so that when it happened in real life, he'd been there a bunch of times. It didn't rattle him that much. And it depends upon, have you imagined it? Have you gone through the mental exercise? And then how did you control it? Did you imagine yourself getting mad? Or did you imagine yourself staying cool? And that's how you react.
Love it. Yeah, so it's being mentally prepared for any situation, regardless of the time.
And knowing that we actually prepare all the time. Our preparation might be like, every time I talk to that person or that type of person, they make me mad every time. Yeah. Well, you're actually preparing to be mad every time. And you can get behind that preparation and go like, you know what? Next time I'm going to hit them with the late night voice. And I can just see myself calming them down. Same amount of preparation time, one's good, one's bad.
And I love the fact that you keep on bringing up emotional intelligence. I think it's something that's not brought up enough, especially in our industry, because it's such not a cutthroat industry, but it's an industry where people are coming in because they need money and you are trying to make a deal. But if you use emotional intelligence, you'll get much further. And I totally believe that.
Farther and faster too.
Yeah.
I mean, the crazy thing about it is it saves time.
Yeah.
And believe me, I'm about saving time.
So what do you think are 3 mistakes that people who say that, I'm a great negotiator make?
First of all, to me, that somebody, I automatically know they got a closed mind. Like if somebody right off bat says, I'm a great negotiator, number one, you got a closed mind, which also means your skills are actually deteriorating because it's a performance, as my friend Jim Camp used to say, it's a performance event, just like any other sport. So it's somebody saying like, I'm a great baseball player, and they never practice. Or, I'm a great home run hitter. The great home run hitters, first of all, don't say that. They get out on the field and they do it, and they practice all the time. So problem is somebody who says that their skills are slowly deteriorating, they got a closed mind. Now, they'll tell you stories where they beat the other side up, and they love that.
Yeah.
Which now that means, all right, so unless you feel you have leverage, you can't get anything done. So hostage negotiators, like, put me in a situation where leverage is completely up in the air. Let me use my skills to change everybody's feelings of leverage. I got a big advantage on that person.
Nice. That's great. Chris, what can you leave us with from all your coaching that you've done in the industries, from real estate and other industries? What do you think the biggest lessons are for people, apart from the emotional intelligence, that they can take with them, plus everything that you've given us already, all this value? Like the one thing, if they could take one thing with them to put into practice tomorrow at their stores, what would it be?
The mirroring technique. Just start mirroring people. When you repeat the last couple of words of what they just said, with the tone of voice that's encouraging, that you actually want to hear more, you haven't taken a position one way or another on anything. That'll probably get you to the heart of the matter much quicker, and the other side's going to feel a lot better about it. And it doesn't take any sort of intelligence or practice to be able to mirror someone. You'll actually find out that they love the interactions, and you'll have a lot more satisfied customers. You probably make deals faster.
Nice. Love it. Chris, how can people get a hold of you or tell us about the book and how they can find you online?
All right, sure. I'd love for people to buy the book, buy it on Amazon, absolute best price. I mean, Amazon beats everybody. They're a great distribution channel. We've got a newsletter that we put out. It comes out once a week, and it's a complimentary newsletter. It's free. A colleague of mine used to like to say, if it's free, I'll take 3. But it's just got one short article in each newsletter. Some newsletters, you get them, they're so jam-packed with information, it wears you out trying to decide what to read. Like, we're giving you something simple and quick and easy to read once a week. A lot of people really like it because it's a good refresher. And the best way to subscribe to that is through a sign up via text. Send a text, FBI empathy, all one word. Don't let your autocorrect put a space between FBI and empathy. And send it to 22828. And again, that's 22828. The words FBI empathy, no space. And you'll get a dialogue box back. And the newsletter is a gateway to everything. It's a gateway to the website, which is blackswanltd.com. But if you got the newsletter, we put in announcements about new training materials, about free training materials. And when we're training across the United States, it's really the gateway to our gold mine.
Awesome. Love it, Chris. So the book is Never Split the Difference. It's on Amazon. I'll put the link in the show notes. And then text FBI empathy to 22828.
And make sure that there's not a space in between FBI and empathy.
Yeah. No space between FBI and empathy. I'll put that in the show notes so you guys can get that. Pawn Leaders, thank you so much for listening to the show. Chris, thank you so much for being on. If you'd like to continue this conversation about negotiation, don't forget to check out the Pawn Leaders podcast community. Review the podcast so that other pawnbrokers can find it and check it out. Thank you for listening. And Chris, I appreciate you and what you've taught us today.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.